Guru Nation, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like. Alright, today's question, due to popular demand, literally, I'm not exaggerating, right? I get asked, and it's understandable, there's so many acronyms in this industry, it could be confusing for someone brand new. So, from time to time, I'll do beginner type videos like this one, and other times I'll do expert videos like how to negotiate an overhead policy in a contract and budget, or how to follow up on a serious adverse event, different stuff like that. This one's for beginners, okay? The difference between a CRA, which is a clinical research associate, and a CRC, a clinical research coordinator. So a clinical research coordinator or a study coordinator, okay, this is typically an entry-level position, although not always, but typically it is. Although you can start beneath a clinical research coordinator, which is a clinical research assistant, which also is a CRA, but not to be confused with a clinical research associate. So it's no wonder people are confused when they start learning about this industry. Just know that the two most popular positions in this industry, other than principal investigator, which most are weeded out from because you need to be an MD or a physician to be a PI, is the study coordinator and the clinical research associate. So these are like the two household names, if there is such a household name, for the clinical research industry as far as job titles, okay? Study coordinator and clinical research associate. Now, both can be obtained with entry level, although it's a lot easier as a CRC. It's a lot more difficult as a CRA, but it is possible. So let's break it down. What is a study coordinator? Study coordinators work directly for the principal investigators, which are the doctors, the PIs for a particular study, and there's oftentimes for one study there are numerous PIs, principal investigators, located across the country, operating separately and independently, but working for one study or a few studies, sponsored by a pharmaceutical company. So, the study coordinator is employed by the PI or the research clinic that the PI either owns, works for, or is a part of. So the study coordinator is the backbone of any given study protocol. So study coordinators do most of the work. They fill out the source documents, they'll create the source documents, they'll work on the regulatory documents, they'll supervise the patient visits, they'll actually conduct the patient visits. The PI is the principal investigator, is supposed to supervise the patient study visits. They'll schedule the patient visits. Sometimes they'll even recruit the patients, and then they will enter the data from the source documents to the electronic data capture system, which is the EDC. So EDC, you have source data, conduct patient visits, interact with patients, conduct drug accountability or compliance of study drug, compliance of the study drug with the patients. They pretty much do everything, and then they'll gather the reports, like they'll gather the adverse event reports, the safety reports, the SUSAR reports. They will make changes to the 1572, everything. They'll do everything involved with the study. Just go watch my 2-hour video on Introduction to Clinical Research. They do all that stuff, okay? That's what a study coordinator does. However, they are not the ones responsible for the conduct of the study at their site. That is the principal investigator. But the principal investigator delegates most of these duties to the CRC or the study coordinator. So, study coordinator typical salary anywhere from $36,000 a year to, I've seen, over $100K, over 6 figures a year. Now, study coordinators, you don't need a bachelor's degree. You don't need a bachelor's. Although many do have it, you don't need one. That's pretty much, that's enough of a Cliff Notes version for what a study coordinator is. Basically, they're the backbone of the study at the site. They don't really travel. They stay at the site. Maybe they'll go to an occasional investigator meeting, but their job functions are at the research clinic that they work for. And they do everything. Data entry, EDC, source data, conduct patient visits, interact with patients, compliance of study drug, regulatory. They prepare the lab results, or they gather the lab results and the ECG results and hand them to the PI, literally hand them to the PI for review. And then they file them in the binder, and everything they do is reviewed by the CRA. So the CRA is a clinical research associate, also known as a monitor. Again, there are some entry-level CRAs, but it's not common. Most of the time, if you go on any job board, you're going to find that they require some experience, at least a year or 2 years of experience to be a CRA. Study coordinators, it's very common for study coordinators to eventually make the jump over to clinical research associates, but unlike the study coordinators, CRAs need to have a bachelor's, either of science or a bachelor's of art, at minimum. It doesn't need to be a science-based degree. It could be a Bachelor of Arts. It could be a bachelor's in journalism. Doesn't matter. You just need a bachelor's degree to be a CRA, and in 99% of the jobs I've seen. Okay. Now, of course, you can have a master's. You can have a RN degree. Okay. That'll get you hired even quicker. And of course, if it is a science-based, medical-based degree like a RN, registered nurse, you're going to be more likely to get hired than if you're a journalism major, right? But you can still do it. I've known many CRAs who have philosophy degrees, journalism degrees, education, all kinds of stuff not even related to science. Now the CRAs, unlike the study coordinators, they are not allowed to collect any data themselves. All they are doing, like the name suggests, is monitoring that the site is following good clinical practice and following the protocol. Also, unlike the study coordinator, the CRAs are not employed by the PI, they're not employed by the research clinic. They're employed either directly by the sponsor or by the companies, the organizations that they work for, called CROs, or contract research organizations. And CROs are the companies that help the sponsors manage their trials. So the CROs will then select the principal investigators at the various different research clinics across the country, and they will manage, they will oversee all of those sites that they selected, and they're basically making sure that the sites are following good clinical practice and the protocol, and they ensure this by hiring CRAs. Now, CRAs have zero interaction with patients. All they do is they look at all the stuff that the study coordinator and the PIs are collecting. Okay, they look at all the stuff that they're recording. They look at the EDC. They look at the source data. They look at those things together. It's called source data verification, also known as SDV, source data verification. They will go in there and issue queries when need be in the EDC system. They will never assign study drug to a patient. They will look to see whether the PI and the study coordinator are appropriately assigning study drug and following the protocol as far as IP compliance of the subjects, which is investigational product. They'll make sure that the patients are coming in at the visit windows per protocol. They'll basically make sure that there's no protocol deviations, no GCP violations, that there's sufficient principal investigator oversight, and basically that the data that they're recording is correct and acceptable as per FDA and sponsor standards. So, it's a lot more work to be a CRA. You travel, so typically you're assigned 6 sites, 5 sites, maybe 1 or 2 studies, and you, again, you're not employed by these research sites. You'll go and do a site visit based on that site's activity of enrollment. So if it's a high enrolling site, meaning they're enrolling a lot of patients, they have a lot of study data to collect, the CRA needs to go out to that site more often, as opposed to a site that's not enrolling anyone. The CRA doesn't need to go to that site more often because there's nothing really to review. So the CRAs, they'll go to the research site for their monitoring visits, and they'll usually stay 1 or 2 days at the site, and then they'll go on to another site, and then they'll go on to a 3rd site and a 4th site, depending on that CRA's workload. And then they will either go back to their home, if they're a home-based CRA, and work on their monitoring reports, their trip reports, source data verification from home or from the office, depending on what type of CRA they are. Are they an in-house CRA or are they a home-based CRA? In-house means you work for the sponsor or the CRO and you have to show up to work. Home-based means you're at home, you have a home office, and you do all your work remotely, but you travel to your sites that you're assigned to, and you're given a specific workload. Okay? Now, because there's a lot more travel involved, and there actually is more work probably for a CRA than a study coordinator. A study coordinator's job ends. Okay, they show up at the clinic at 8, they leave at 6. For the most part, they're done, unless there's an emergency, but typically research clinics have a dedicated phone number for emergencies, and it typically doesn't go to the study coordinator. So coordinators are done with their jobs. Monitors are really never done with their jobs, even if it's salary based. They won't get calls like at 2 in the morning, but their job really is never done because source data verification is an ongoing thing, and they may be given more sites once their workload slows down. So rather than just enjoying that time off, you're being paid a salary, you're given more sites to look at, and sometimes you're given problem sites to monitor. And so it is a much more stressful, in my opinion, stressful position than a study coordinator. So it's compensated more. Typically, you'll get anywhere from $65K a year salary to, I know some monitors that make $300K a year if they're independent contractors, meaning they take on different contracts from various different sponsors and CROs, but now we're getting fancy, right? I want to keep this simple. So that's pretty much the difference between a CRA and a CRC. A CRC answers to the PI. A CRA does not answer to the PI, but the CRA actually makes sure the PI is conducting the study appropriately at his or her site. A CRA answers to his or her project manager or clinical team lead, who answers to the sponsor. So that's the basic breakdown. I know there's a lot more in between that I left out. I'm trying to keep this simple. Go look at the other videos on there, and then as always, if you have questions, let me know, alright, in the comments, or send me an email, or call or text me, or find me on any social network. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.